Coast FM's Celebrity Science, bringing you interviews with scientists, celebrities, and special guests. Well, hey, good evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Ben Makin, for Celebrity Science here on Coast FM from 6 o'clock, going through until 8 o'clock this evening. Whoop! Oh, yeah, I'm back. Thank you very much indeed for having me back. It's been a lonely couple of months whilst I've been off air, I can tell you that, people, but I'm delighted, because now we are reunited. Tell you what, to celebrate, how about I get you a cheeky little song on, yeah? Or a little shout-out? Well, I tell you what, as I'm presenting this evening, you are so welcome to text the Coastline with your message. I will get it out. Or if you've got a song request, song you particularly want to hear, get that to me as well. I will get it on for you. The number is 07441 900 600. That number again is 07441 900 600. Now, guess what? It is the Hero Special this evening. Because, it is the season of superheroes, isn't it? We've been kind of spoiled recently with superhero films. We've had Aquaman, which was awesome. We then had Shazam. Obviously, now we've got Endgame. Just going to tell you right now as well, there's going to be no spoilers, okay? So you're totally safe. There's a spoiler-free zone this evening, ladies and gents. So you can listen stress-free. I know what it's like. But we have got, now here comes the exciting part, we've got the director of Shazam, of New Line Cinemas, Shazam, starring Zachary Levi from Chuck and Mark Strong from Kingsman as supervillain Dr. Savannah. We've got David F. Sandberg, the director of that film, on the show this evening. His previous work, actually, this is going to spook you a bit, and actually, I'm not going to say anything too much in case it ruins the film for you and haven't seen it yet, but there is, I think, one scene in particular in Shazam which, gives a little hint into his past work here. His past work, horror films, Annabelle Creation, and the particularly scary Lights Out. As I said, there is but one scene in Shazam that kind of gives it away that he's into horror there. Went to see it with my bro James. James, you best be listening, son. You best be. Think he might be, which is good. I'll get a song on for you. And Fred as well. You best be listening, son. Maybe I'll get a cheeky little saxophone song on for Fred as well, because he's quite into that. Anyway, that's a different story. Alongside David Sandberg today, we also have, because, just one superhero film, that's not enough. I said season of superheroes. This is a hero special. Need more than one. Luckily, we've got Peter Safran. He's the producer of Aquaman. Again, I like what DC are doing here. DC Comics, their films, their superhero films. They've basically nabbed a load of epic horror movie guys to make their new set of films. Because his previous work, of course, in addition to Aquaman, is The Conjuring. You've probably heard of that. Great horror film. And, of course, the Annabelle franchise, which is a massive horror franchise. Great stuff. And those of you who are into your fitness, then this is a reason to listen to this interview, because Zachary Levi has infamously put on over 20 pounds of muscle. He did weights 5 or 6 times a week to play Shazam in this film. Pretty cool stuff. So if you want to see something, a little bit sensual, especially for the ladies out there, I don't know, if you want to see something a bit sensual, just Google Zachary Levi 2019. Thank me later. Now, thinking about superheroes, we've also got this guy. He sounds a bit like a superhero. Hurricane Man. What do you think? I don't know. He's not an Avenger yet, I don't think, but maybe he will be. This is actually a new series on UK TV all about storm chaser Josh Morgaman. Now, Josh actually goes into storms. Now, this is a bit bonkers, personally, I think. A brave man. He finds storms. He goes right into the storms. And it's all for great cause. A, for great TV, obviously. But B, also to raise awareness of the people who, of course, unfortunately, are suffering because of those storms. So I'm going to play that interview for you this evening, and all of those shows are actually available on demand if you want to check them out on UK TV. Now, today, Josh is alongside Sarah Thornton. She's a weather broadcaster, used to work for the Met Office. She also, because we had a bit of inside banter at the beginning of this, before we had the interview, she also actually did a stint for Pirate FM, which I did as well, but we don't talk about that here because this is Coast FM. Sorry, moving on. Now, we are going to get some science in for you this evening, obviously, because we're called Celebrity Science. Got to, really, haven't we? Emily Penn Emily is a skipper and an ocean advocate, and recently a Sky Ocean Rescue Ambassador. Now, recently, and this was actually all as part of a live broadcast on Sky, which was pretty amazing, submarines went down recently as part of this broadcast to look essentially for marine plastic pollution at the bottom of the ocean. Of course, marine plastic pollution is an issue which receives an awful lot of well-deserved attention at the moment. We've had a few previous guests actually on the show here on Coast. Dr. Heather Calderway, you might remember, talking about her ocean optimism and all of her work in encouraging people to become ocean optimists and look after the oceans and reduce the amount of plastic waste. You can check out that interview on our YouTube. Yeah, little cheeky self-plug there. Yep, you know it. I'm full of those. We also had actually Emily Duncan. Emily knows Emily Penn rather well, as it turns out, because they both went on a pretty amazing expedition. Bit more on that later this evening. Now, we also have Ewan Thomas, MBE. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, yeah, boy, Ben, this is looking awesome. Well, thank you very much. But that's not all. Because our star scientist of the show has not yet been announced, so you just listen. First of all, though, we've got Ewan Thomas, MBE. I actually caught Ewan ahead of the London Marathon. He's a Welsh sprinter who represented Great Britain and Northern Ireland at the Olympic Games in the 400-metre sprint. Ewan's giving his tips for budding runners, especially useful, I suppose, for anybody who might be considering doing the marathon next year. So he's going to give some tips on that and how he personally trains, how he recommends you train, etc. Great stuff. Also get a song request out of him, which is pretty cool. So, got you covered tonight, Ewan. Don't you worry. Now we also have, here we go, the star scientist of tonight's show. It's Joan Strassman. She's Professor of Biology at Washington University in St. Louis. She's from the Strassman Research Group, and she researches strange symbioses in amoebae. Yes, as I said on my little live broadcast before I started this show, amoebae is a word. It's the correct plural term for amoeba, called single-celled protists. More on that a bit later. She's going to be talking about symbiosis. And if you're one of those people who isn't really into their science, into their biosciences, then what? First of all. But secondly, you will be. Because you just stay tuned, all right? You listen to this. It's going to be exciting. Mutualism and symbiosis is an area that's pretty close to my heart, actually. It's an area I personally research as well. Won't bore you too much with my own research. No. Boring stuff. We're going to focus on the cool stuff that Joan studies. Anyway, symbiosis, if I haven't caught your attention with that word yet, it actually applies to us as well. Now, that's cooler. Yeah? All right, well, listen in a bit later to find out what I'm on about there. And, of course, in all of this, sandwiched nicely into this science and celebrity sandwich, if you like, the pepperoni on this chicken and chorizo... Wait, what am I talking about? Okay, the chorizo on this chicken sandwich, I should say, right, is... What? This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. No, okay, there's going to be songs as well. There's going to be music, all right? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, now, try and continue in a bit of a more sane fashion now. I think, though, you know what? I was going to play you some music, but I think, actually, I'm going to dive right in with the fantastic Men's Health cover star, Ross Edgley, to start with. Hope that's cool with you. Ross is going to be talking about some of his recent challenges. Oh, let's just get him on. He's a cool guy. And as I said, he was on the front cover of Men's Health, so he's got to be cool. Enjoy, guys. Join me in the studio straight after this. We're going to get you some tunes on and way more special guests and epic chats and some banter. Yes. Sorry, I won't use that word again. I'll just get this on for you.
Oh, Ben, how are we doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. Thanks very much for chatting to me today, Ross. Really appreciate this.
No, not at all. No, thank you. Thanks for making time.
No worries. So if you're all good to go, Ross, could I just ask you, well, just to dive straight in there and just introduce yourself for our listeners, if that's cool, then I'll shoot some questions your way.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm Ross Edgley, and perhaps best known for becoming the first person to swim all the way around Great Britain.
Epic, thanks Ross, that's fantastic. You know what, I've literally just this minute put a purchase in for your book, actually, The World's Fittest Book.
No, you haven't been. Oh, you legend. Thank you, mate.
Well, I've just recently kind of got into fitness. I've started kind of doing like early morning workouts and stuff with a mate of mine, so really keen on trying to get in shape, mate. So I think it's going to help me out.
Oh no! Oh, you like? Well, and what are you thinking this year? What are you training for?
Nothing in particular, actually. I mean, it's just basically just trying to get into, well, generally just into shape. So I've just been doing
we call it. It's called Wild Fit. It's like a local thing to me here in Falmouth, and basically you just do. I suppose just body readiness training, basically. So just a bunch of random stuff each morning.
Oh, I love that. Oh, you're in Falmouth as well?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, I love Falmouth, man. The support around there on the swim was nuts. Oh, thank you.
No, well, it's great to be chatting to you anyway. So, I mean, Ross, I'd love to, first of all, perhaps, have you got any particular, obviously there's the swimming challenge, which was absolutely awesome, and I'm sure people have already come across that, but I don't know if we could start but just by just chatting through some of your favourite fitness challenges, perhaps.
Yeah, it's hard. So it's a bit of a strange, eclectic sporting CV. I think there's ranging from the marathon pulling a car. So I ran 26.2 miles pulling a 1.4 ton car, raised
Nice.
lots of money for charity. That was awesome. Then I climbed a rope. The height of Everest, so repeatedly climbed it. It's a 20-metre rope, repeatedly climbed it, 8,848
Oh, my
metres.
God.
God, bad. My hands have only just forgiven me for that one. That was bad. And then, from the Great British Swim, I think, which was just, I think, a lot of people, the way that kind of captured the imagination of a lot of people, I think it was just, I don't know what it is. I think we're a nation of sort of British eccentric explorers at heart, I think. So for a lot of other people, it was amazing to see how it was sort of received around the world. But people in Britain just went, why wouldn't you swim around this big rock that we call Great Britain, So that was probably my favourite and the most recent.
Oh, that sounds absolutely epic, and I'm just really pleased that we've got you at this time as well, because hopefully, right, we're going to try and encourage people to get outdoors, and I know if people have started fitness challenges this year, let's hope they manage to keep them going, get outside and get on with it.
Do you know what? It's exactly that, and a lot of people look at the Great British Swim and they say, that's a bit much. 2,000 miles, 157 days at sea. And I'm like, yes. No, I don't recommend it. It's a niche sport, like very, very niche sport. We humans are actually created. I always say, look at the animal kingdom. We're not the biggest. We're not the strongest. We haven't even got big teeth and fangs or, like claws. We don't do that. The one thing we're really, really good at is just adventure and exploring, and that's why we're kind of top of the food chain. And I think, with some of our research revealing now, like 40% of people are actually throwing themselves into, the great outdoors, no matter the weather, and people are taking on more challenges. 25% of people are now challenging themselves to do obstacle races, to get outdoors and do the trail runs that they've always wanted to do. And then for me, that's amazing, and that's the biggest message of the Great British Swim, and also our research as well, that we're just trying to get people to do what the human body was designed to do.
I think that's a wicked perspective on it, actually, Ross. I think if people can get that into their heads and get out and, as you say, try something new to get fit, then sounds like an awesome plan for people, I think.
Yeah, it is exactly that, and I think it's an innate, it's sort of inbuilt and innate within all of us. That I just think, you don't have to take it to the sort of extremes that I do. More, it's these everyday moments, and again with the new Covent Garden suit swimmers, they are amazing. If you go over to the website and look at the Soup Up tab, it's just. They are the most amazing collection of wild swimmers, and regardless of the weather outside, if it's frost, if it's snow, if it's sun, it doesn't matter. We often say that there's no such thing as bad weather, just a bad attitude, and they're certainly the living embodiment of that. That it doesn't matter. We're often far more powerful than our own minds allow us to believe. And when you look at our ancestors, they wouldn't have thought about anything about crossing mountains and fells and swimming lakes. And it's just kind of like, let's get back to that, let's get back to that primitive, powerful state.
Epic. Well, thanks so much, Ross. I will let you go. Pleasure chatting to you. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to trying some new things and getting into your book as well, mate. You're going to love it.
Oh, mate, you're a gentleman, mate. Thank you so much. And good luck with your training.
Thank you very much, Ross. See you then. Thanks.
Legend. Thank you. Bye, mate. Thank you.
Hey, welcome back. Okay, we are moving on with the show because it's about time that we welcomed the director of Shazam, David Sandberg, alongside producer of Aquaman, Peter Safran. It's the moment we've been waiting for. Yeah, okay, enough of that now. I've given this a bit of a build-up, haven't I? Let's just get the guys on. Sorry about this, guys.
Hey, Ben, how are you this morning?
I am very well, thank you, chaps. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
It's our pleasure.
Now, I'm going to have to admit it to you guys. I'm wearing my brand new Shazam t-shirt just for this interview.
Oh, that's fantastic. We love hearing that.
Now, Peter, I'll start with yourself if that's okay. Now, I know this is your second foray into the superhero genre after Aquaman, which was awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Now, although the story is set in the same cinematic universe, the DC universe, I believe you and David were really keen to explore a different tone in this movie. Could you kind of tell us a little bit about how the tone of this film is going to differ from your previous work?
Sure. I mean, I think, with each of these movies, the idea is to use a tone that suits the character from both the comic book and the story that you want to tell. So, Aquaman has that much more fantastical feel to it as you're exploring, the worlds that have never been seen underwater before. But Shazam, it really leans into the idea of a fun and funny action comedy with this tremendous wish fulfillment core to it. Because that's the character. It's a 14-year-old boy who gets the power to become an adult superhero when he says the word Shazam. So it just naturally lends itself to something, really funny. And we frequently described it as Big meets Superman. And that's really what the movie is.
Thanks very much, Peter. That's fantastic. Now, David, I'll turn to yourself, sir. And I'm afraid I really can't thank you for your previous work. Lights Out, it scared the absolute pants off me, man.
Nice. Well, that's what I want. That's the biggest compliment. Scaring your pants off.
Well, it certainly did, anyway. So, anyway, David, I mean, it really sounds like you've assembled your own kind of dream team of creatives that you've worked with before for this movie. From director of photography, Maxime Alexandra, stunt teams from Aquaman, production designer Jennifer Spence, and composer Benjamin Wallfish. Could you tell us a bit about this dream team that you've put together?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you take on something that's very new to you, you want to work with people who you know are awesome and work well together. And there was just so much. I mean, I think the key to being a good director is hiring the people who are much more experienced than you and has life experience as well. Like our production designer, Jennifer Spence, who designed this group home where the foster kids live. I mean, she's worked in a group home herself and could base the house on that, but she could also tell me about her experience being, a foster parent. So that's the great thing about movies, that it's such a collaborative experience.
A really obvious thing, I think, for anyone who's been following social media and things, is that there's actually a real commitment right across the board with this movie. Now, especially, I think, that's most obvious to people looking at pictures on Google, in terms of hours even spent in the gym by star Zachary Levi, of course. What an epic body transformation.
He was very dedicated, yeah. And I was shocked to see how much you actually have to eat to get a physique like that. He has to eat like every other hour to get enough calories to put on that kind of weight. And even when shooting, it was sometimes like, all right, we're ready, we set up the shot, bring in Zach, and it's like, oh, he's eating, he just has to finish his meal.
Fantastic. I wonder if we could touch on the costume as well just for a while. Fantastic costume, really kind of striking costume. I know this was put together with your frequent collaborator Leah Butler, of course, but I think, David, you had a really specific vision for how you wanted this to look, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, Shazam is one of the older superheroes. He is from the golden age of comics, around the time when Superman came out, and I wanted him to feel like a golden age superhero, and also what a 14-year-old kid would be like, okay, this is what a superhero should look like. But at the same time, have him be in a style where you could put him next to someone in the Justice League, for example, and he would fit in. But yeah, so it was a combination of like the shorter cape, for example, which is very old school, but then having details like, the textured suit that you have in the Man of Steel Superman. So it was a lot of fun to bring all these elements together and create our own version of a superhero. One
of my favourite facts about it actually is that I believe the bolt itself actually does light up, doesn't it?
When it wants to cooperate, yes. There were a lot of issues, like, you'd be in the middle of a take and suddenly the bolt would just turn off or turn on super bright. So there were moments where I was like, I really regret going down this practical
Quick change
route.
Shazam's batteries.
Yeah, but then you have moments that are these great visual moments of like Shazam stepping out of smoke, or he's in darkness and you see the light shining through, and it's like, okay, it was worth it.
Fantastic. Now, guys, I'm going to have to interrupt just for a second because I want to ask a question that I think Billy Batson himself might ask you both. Is that all right?
Sure.
This is an obvious one, really. Which superpowers would you both pick, though? If you were kind of in the DC universe with Shazam, which powers would you pick? I mean, obviously, production and directing, that kind of already is a superpower, so you can't say that. What superpower would you pick?
Yeah, those are pretty lame superpowers. There's no kid that the wish fulfillment is to produce movies.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the Shazam superpower that I've been liking more and more is his electricity powers, because he can just do so much with it. It really does come in handy to be able to shoot lightning and control lightning.
Yeah, and for me, it's actually not a Shazam power. For me, it's teleportation, I think, is the one. The tremendous convenience of getting from point A to point B instantaneously. As I sit in London traffic today, teleportation is the way to go.
No more tube for you. You'd be great. Just have a cup of coffee and you're there already, right?
It's the ultimate Oyster card.
Absolutely amazing. I wonder if as well we could kind of touch on one of the main messages. I don't want to give away too much, of course, but one of the main messages of the movie, which I think is really, really nice, is all about family, isn't it? I wonder if you could both kind of touch on that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, it is about, Billy is a foster kid who's been, he thinks his mom is out there, he's trying to find her, and it has a message about family not being necessarily about blood, but about bond and finding your family. And I love that we were able to show a positive depiction of a group home and foster kids, because usually in movies you have like the evil foster parents and the bad group home,
And ultimately, what one of the messages of the film is, there is a superhero inside each one of us, no matter your color, age, race, etc. And the question is just how do you get that superhero out? How do you find a way to access it? And we think that the foster home setting is something that's pretty unique, and it works beautifully for the film.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks so much, guys. I won't keep you too much longer now. We'll let you go. I just want to thank you very much indeed for chatting to us on Coast FM and Source FM today. And yeah, I'll let you go. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Ben. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Guys, you know what? Maybe you should let me know what your superpower would be. What would you pick? What would you pick? Text it me on the coastline. Tell you what, the coolest answer. Maybe I should find a little prize for you. Maybe. Text anyway, see what happens. Nothing to lose. 07441 900 600 is your number. 07441 900 600. Your standard message rates will apply there, unfortunately, unless you're Shazam himself, in which case you probably don't really need to pay because you can just come over and hassle me or something. Actually, you still do. Sorry, even that's not going to get you out of this one. Anyway, moving on with Celebrity Science, the show for you this evening. I would like now to welcome to the show Josh Morgan, Storm Chaser. He's alongside today Sarah Thornton. She's a weather broadcaster and previously worked at the Met Office. Previously worked at Pirate FM as well, but shh. We don't mention Pirate FM here because it's Coast FM all night long, baby. Yeah, sorry. Getting a bit carried away as usual. I am a bit excited tonight, peeps. Anyway, time to get this interview on. Straight after this, got a banging song request, so it's looking up. It's really looking up. I think I've thought already of the perfect song to accompany your appearance today, because I like to give my guests a little song track. I don't know if this is going to fly, but because of hurricanes, right, what about this? You spin me right round, baby. What do you think?
It's better than Take the Weather With You or It's Raining Men.
Please, no, It's Raining Men. Thank you. As long as it's not that.
Okay. I'll avoid those. Maybe I'll let you pick one at the end of the interview anyway, if that's all right. Well, both of you, good to go. I wonder if could I just first ask you actually just to jump in and introduce yourselves, if that's all right, for our listeners today. And then I will fire some questions away about this brand new show, which sounds awesome.
I'm Josh Morgan. I'm from Southern California. I chase hurricanes all around the world, and I'm starring in a new series called Hurricane Man.
And I'm Sarah Thornton, and you might have seen me on the TV. I've been a weather broadcaster across the UK for the last number of years. I won't say how many. And I also formerly worked at the Met Office.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks, Josh and Sarah. Fantastic to have you. Let's start then talking about this brand new show, Hurricane Man. Josh, I wonder if, first of all, could you just kind of outline it for our listeners? Because it sounds pretty intense, mate. I'm not going to lie.
Oh yeah, no, it's incredible. It's a front row seat to the most violent storms all around the earth. So what we do is, I chase hurricanes, and in East Asia that's called a typhoon, same exact thing. So I hunt them down around the earth, Japan, Mexico, Philippines, U.S., wherever. 3 crews follow me. One comes with me as I hunt down the exact center of the storm to collect data. A second crew embeds with a local family to get their experience, their terror as the storm hits. And the third crew embeds with emergency services to get their take on it, how they try to manage the disaster. So you get this cool, like, multi-dimensional view of what happens when a hurricane smashes a city. And it's incredible. It's a front row seat. It's educational. It's emotional. It's suspenseful. And it just gives you the experience of what it's like to be, for example, in a Category 4 hurricane when it smashes an American city.
And Josh, there's kind of a number of things that I was thinking about asking about this, but one of the most kind of obvious things that comes to mind is I imagine it's actually super handy and really, really good for actually just raising awareness, especially for the kind of recovery efforts and for people in need who are hit by storms and things. The fact that you're kind of in there and showing people what it's like, I imagine that does wonders for, raising awareness for those people.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things I'm most proud of as a storm chaser is when a hurricane hits a city and devastates it, that becomes an important moment in that city's or town's history. And so folks like me are in there, we're documenting history, and it's really important. And like you said, we're also raising that awareness. There was a typhoon that struck the Philippines 5 years ago, Super Typhoon Haiyan. It flattened a city, the thousands dead. The aid started coming in when the pictures and the videos got out, and folks in other countries because words don't mean anything. People need to see videos and pictures of the devastation. Then they realize, wow, this is serious, and that's when the help comes.
It's exactly like what's going on actually across southern Africa right now, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, etc. Because they had that cyclone there last week, but it really wasn't until the weekend when the pictures started to emerge that really we started to get a real clear sense of just how badly devastated it has been there and how much they need the aid, they need the support. And the last few nights, of course, across the TV networks, we've been seeing the pictures of just mud everywhere where they've had these mudslides because of the intense rainfall. And it's really that visual aid that helps in these situations.
Mm. And Sora, kind of a related question for you, because I was kind of wondering about the, I'm absolutely not an expert at all in this area, so from a complete kind of outsider's perspective, I wonder if both of you could kind of jump in on this if you like to as well, but I was kind of wondering about the process of kind of, identifying a potential future storm, and, how does all that kind of work?
Yeah, so what tends to happen is we'll see an area of low pressure, it started to really intensify, becomes a tropical depression, and then that is going to intensify into a storm. For what Josh is doing with the Atlantic hurricane season particularly, we watch the National Hurricane Center, parts of NOAA in the US, and they'll really start to identify these systems. They'll give them a number, and then they'll give them an identity, and then we'll just watch them. Sometimes they start coming off the coast of Africa and traveling their way towards the Atlantic, across the Atlantic towards the Caribbean, for instance, and they're the ones that are most likely going to end up affecting parts of the US seaboard or the Caribbean, and we just kind of watch them. The great thing about a hurricane in some ways is it's a bit of a Frankenstein monster because it's slow and it's lumbering and you can see it coming from days out. Whereas if you have something like a tornado, you don't know it's coming. So, I was in the States a couple of weeks ago when the tornadoes really hit Alabama, and particularly this terrible F4 tornado which flattened this tiny little town in Alabama and killed so many people. That kind of came out of nowhere. They had 15 minutes to get prepared for that. They knew there was a possibility of some storms. They'd said 24 hours previously, but really you can't pinpoint those. Whereas a hurricane, they're vast. They're enormous. If you ever get to see the satellite pictures from space, you just see how they're taking up not just states, but whole corners of the U.S.
But just to add to that, though, one thing is people do get a little deceived when they see a hurricane, a satellite picture of one. It does look really big, but the really violent part, the part that's really destructive, is actually covers a pretty small area. So as you get closer to the center, it gets more and more violent. And the worst part of it is a very tight ring around the middle. It's called the eye wall. That's where the crazy stuff happens. That's where buildings collapse, cars get thrown like toys. And then once you get in through that inner ring, you get into the eye, which is the calm center. The sun comes out and stops raining for a few minutes. So that inner ring usually hits a much smaller area than the storm as a whole. Like hundreds of miles of the coast gets bad weather, but only about, let's say, 10 or 20 miles of the coast gets the really nutty part.
But the interesting thing is, I saw the first episode of Hurricane Man last week, and it's so exciting, it's so exhilarating, it's a massive adrenaline rush, but in part because Josh was trying to get into the eye wall of Hurricane Michael at the first episode, and I was thinking, when they finally got into the eye, that's great, but now you have to go through the other side.
Yes, yeah.
So it is absolutely terrifying to watch.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. It must just be kind of a really humbling experience as well, that the kind of weather can harness that much power, because obviously, here in the UK, we don't tend to kind of think of the weather this kind of almighty machine of destruction, do we? It must be quite humbling knowing that it's got that power.
Absolutely. It's funny. I've been in almost 50 hurricanes. Just since childhood, and I'll tell you, that feeling of just being humbled by the wrath of a hurricane, it never gets old. If you like really violent, crazy weather, North America is a great place to be from, because we get everything there. But I'll tell you, there's nothing like a really intense hurricane. It's so otherworldly, and it's so crazy. I could understand why, in ancient times, people, when a hurricane was, like, when they'd be in a hurricane, that they would think it was like the wrath of the gods.
Yes,
because I'll tell you, it feels that way. Even to me, I know the science behind it, and I know what a hurricane is. Even to me, when I'm deep in a really bad one like Michael, like episode 1 shows, it feels, there's something angry about it. It's really weird. Like, you forget that this is just a natural thing. This is just the earth doing its thing, and we're in the way. It feels evil. It feels angry.
And Ben, the thing is, it's interesting to think about Michael in comparison to Boscastle. Coming up for the 15th anniversary of the Boscastle floods, and other little parts, of course, of Cornwall were also flooded in that event. Now, that was an exceptional rain event, the likes of which you would rarely see. Over 8 hours, we're talking about, how many, 7 inches of rain? But compare that to Hurricane Harvey in 2017, which really flooded out Texas so badly. They had 40 inches of rain in 4 days. So, we saw the flooding in Boscastle. We know how bad the weather can be here in the UK, particularly Cornwall. It's really affected by that, because we have what we call convergence lines, where the winds meet together across the peninsula and across the moors, and they really create these very, very intense downpours, these storms, which is why we get this kind of flooding sometimes in parts of Cornwall. And, of course, in the UK, we're starting to name storms now. This is, the 4th year now that we've been naming them, just like we do with the Atlantic hurricanes. We flip-flop between the male and female names, and it is very interesting. But still, we've not seen anything like some of these storms that Josh is following.
And Sarah, I was really keen to kind of get your opinion on this, really. And I suppose it's kind of an obvious question that might come to our listeners' minds. But do you think that we're kind of more likely to see more extreme weather events with climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. The science is there to back that up. For a long time, we didn't link specific weather events to climate change, and we talk about weather as being the thing that's happening right now, and climate as being what you would expect based on long-term trends. So we kind of keep watching them all the time, collecting data sets and analysing them and saying this is what you would normally expect the weather to be like, and of course the weather never quite behaves exactly like that, but it tends to even itself out. But what we are of course seeing is more and more extreme weather, and the science is actually there now to back up certainly that more extreme weather events are in line for not just the UK, but really the whole entire world as we go through the coming decades, and the planet keeps warming. The hope was to keep the warming to just 2 degrees over the next decades. It could get up to 3 degrees. If it does, that will spell some really, really extreme weather. And the interesting thing is, we used to say global warming as a phrase. Now we say climate change, because not everywhere will warm, but we will see more extreme weather.
Well, thanks very much for that, Sarah. Josh, I'll just return to you, and I won't keep you both for too much longer now. I'm aware of your time, but I was kind of wondering where it kind of started, because it sounds like this, quite obviously, takes an enormous amount of bravery for you to kind of go into these storms and, of course, make this series for people, which is fantastic. But just the process of going into a storm, that sounds terrifying. That bravery must be pretty intense, Josh.
It's an addiction that I've had since I was a child. I grew up on an island off the east coast of the U.S., and, every time we'd get a hurricane, when the wind would start to blow, the house would shake, trees would come down, I would just get excited. It was like a drug. And my whole life, I feel like I've just been chasing down that feeling, that experience again and again, and yeah, I get scared sometimes in some of these, some of the really bad ones, but my curiosity and my fascination for it just outweighs my fear, and that's what keeps me going. Just because my curiosity is always just 1 millimeter further than my fear, but it puts me in some wild situations. And fortunately, I've been in a lot of situations where I was able to help people. I'm an able-bodied guy and a hurricane expert. I know how to survive all kinds of crazy situations, like being in a building as it's collapsing and stuff like that. So I've fortunately been in a situation where I've been able to help people just along the way.
Perhaps, most importantly, actually, perhaps you can choose the song now. I don't know if you do have a favourite one. I mean, I know I put out some pretty daft suggestions at the beginning there, but I'll let you pick one if you'd like to. So there we are.
I'll leave the song to Sarah.
Well, I've also I'll just make a quick plug for our weather company, Weather Trending. We're on social media. You can follow us there, and we're always there to answer your questions about the weather and what you want to do, your forecasts and that kind of thing.
And yeah, actually, if folks want to follow me and my adventures on Twitter or Facebook, it's iCyclone. The letter I, the word cyclone, no spaces.
And for me, with a song, people always tend to have your radio stations and then play It's Raining Men, but I don't want that one. So I'm going to go with Summertime.
Perfect.
Now, which one you use, I don't know, but I like the old Porgy and Bess version. But if you want to play DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, I'm sure you probably will.
Well, no, that's perfect. I'm going to go with your original suggestion. Sorry, it's okay. Don't worry. I can't be mean to you, can I? That's perfect. Well, thank you very much to both of you. Well, thanks again, and I suppose I best let you go now. But thanks for chatting to us on Coast FM and Source FM today.
Thanks. It was great to talk to you, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Both. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, what a storming song request there. We, of course, are going to get that on a little bit later. First is the ad. We've had a couple of suggestions for Superpowers after that Shazam interview. Thank you for letting me know. One mystery texter says that their perfect superpower would be being able to create and close holes in everything. So, for example, you could seal bullet wounds. Now, that would be pretty awesome. And you know what? I've just thought of another use for that. Okay, hear me out. I'm just trying to think, right? You'd have to aim it pretty well, but what if you jumped from really high up, maybe from outer space? I mean, I know obviously that bit's a bit inconvenient, but then, as you're falling, you just create a hole in the earth as you're passing through, reseal it behind you, obviously, so you don't cause too much damage. It's fine, I'm sure it'll work. And then, right, you could kind of travel to anywhere you want, like as long as you aim right, you just like pass through. I'm sure that'll work, wouldn't it? Maybe. Also, I tell you one thing, you wouldn't be able to be hit by cars or anything like that, would you? You'd be invulnerable. Because if someone tries to, I don't know, run you over in a tank or something, you just create a hole in the tank, sorted. Or you could just retreat into the pavement for a bit. Oh, that's a cool one. Now, we've also got, from my bros, actually, they've texted in some pretty epic suggestions. Let's see what we got. Here. Conjuring a pint at will. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of that one, James. I might have to do that. Might have to do that, I wish I could do that. But might have to, tell you what, maybe I should let the director of Shazam know so that next time he makes a superhero film, that can be the superhero power. We've also got super jumping. That would be cool, like a kind of super froggy man. I like that one. If only... You know what my superpower would be? Imagine if you had the power. You know, even if you had a dreadful taste in music, imagine being able to force everybody to listen to it. How amazing would that... Oh. Wait a minute. More of a super villain power, isn't it? I'm going to get you with this bad boy. It's not dreadful taste, though, is it? It's fantastic taste. Welcome back to the show. It's me, Ben. I'm still in the studio. I'm so sorry to disappoint you. I have not gone home yet. Sorry about that. I'm here for another hour. Can you believe it? And I'm here again next Wednesday. Oh, what is it coming to? Hey. Anyway, I'm going to dedicate this next hour of the show to a bit of science. We've also got a bit of sport to fit in, if we have time this week. If not, don't worry, I will not skip any of our very special guests. You will hear from them next week if we do have to delay them this week. What's coming up in the next hour then? Well, we have Emily Penn. She's a skipper and an ocean advocate, and most recently a Sky Ocean Rescue Ambassador. Now, recently, submarines went down to the bottom of the ocean, actually, looking for marine plastic pollution. This was part of a live broadcast put on by Sky. I don't know if you caught this. It was on recently. Now, I actually had the chance to chat to Emily a bit about this, a bit about her role, a bit about her work, and a bit about marine plastic pollution in general. What a massive issue it is. Of course, it's getting an awful lot of coverage at the moment, so we really have people like Emily to thank for that, really. You might also, this might actually be, you might be recalling some old interviews that you might have heard on the show. I'll be giving those another play of the coming weeks, actually, in this next season, shall I call it, of Celebrity Science. Haha, yeah, that sounds quite official, doesn't it? Anyway, I don't know if you recall Dr. Heather Calderway making an appearance on the show with her Ocean Optimism, hashtag Ocean Optimism. Is one to search for to see some of her work. She's a major player in the area of preventing marine pollution. And also, you can follow hashtag Exeter Marine. That's where all of the University of Exeter's marine output is based. So you can check that out too. More on that in a second, actually, with this interview with Emily. But we also have, and this is fantastic, the scientist star of tonight's show. It's Joan Strassman, Professor of Biology at Washington University in St. Louis. She visited us recently, and I caught her for the radio, which is fantastic. She's at the Quella Strassman Research Group, and she researches symbiosis. Now, symbiosis, I'll be talking a bit more about this towards the end of the show, because, unfortunately for you, it is my own personal area. I'm technically supposed to be a scientist. I don't know. That's quite hard to believe, isn't it? Yeah, I know. It is for me as well, people. Trust me. Anyway, it is technically, I suppose, my area as well. So maybe I'll bore you. Maybe I'll chat a bit about my work there, but probably not, okay? You'll be safe, probably. Anyway, Professor Strassman will be explaining all about her work. She works on amoebae. As I said at the beginning of the show, that is the correct plural term for amoeba. Of course, amoeba referring to the single-celled protists. You're probably familiar with them, actually, from school. If you did biology at school, you might have even looked at these under the microscope. They look pretty funky. They look like kind of living blobs of goo, kind of move about the place and absorb things through their kind of cell walls. It's a bit spooky, really. They basically wrap things up in their cell membrane and absorb them. That's how they eat. A lot of cells do that, actually, but amoeba, I think, do it in a quite dramatic way. Very spooky stuff. Anyway, Strassman herself is going to be talking a bit about that. These amoebae are amazing. I'm not going to give away too much about her work, but there's a very weird symbiosis going on with these. So these tiny single-celled organisms, they actually have these bacteria inside them. And researchers discovered, actually, that these bacteria are food sources. They're carried around a bit like farms. So the amoeba can release them, grow them, eat them. And they also found, now, I'm not going to take away too much thunder from Strassman's talk in a second, but they also found that there's another bacterium as well, which is kind of like the overseer of that relationship, if you like. Very weird. Called a symbiosis. It's this tight association between different species. And you know what? If that hasn't interested you, then we ourselves are examples of symbioses as well. Now, come on, that's a bit cool, isn't it? It is. It is cool. Anyway, more on that a bit later. I think for now, I'm going to invite the fantastic Emily Penn to the show. Emily, welcome, and thank you very much again for chatting to me. Hey, Emily, can you hear me okay there?
I can.
Hiya, thanks very much indeed for this. Really appreciate your time today.
No problem.
You must know Emily Duncan, Emily. I believe she came on one of your expeditions before, the your project expedition. I think she came on there as a science advisor on one of your trips before. She's one of our PhD students here at Exeter, so that's pretty awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah, I sailed across the Pacific Ocean with her this summer. Yeah. She was wonderful.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really keen to talk about a bunch of your different projects you got on, especially the this very exciting potential dive that you might be involved with as well. Fantastic. First of all, Emily, if it's okay with you, and if you're all good to go, I'll just let you dive in there and introduce yourself for our listeners, if that's okay. Then I will fire some questions at you, if that's cool.
Sure. So I'm Emily Penn. I'm a trustee of Necton and a Sky Ocean Rescue Ambassador, as well as a skipper, and I've spent the last decade sailing around the world studying marine plastic pollution. But here today to talk about the Deep Ocean Live, which is actually happening right now. There are submersibles going to the depths of our ocean in the Seychelles, to a very, very remote part of our planet that hasn't been seen before, to broadcast a live documentary about what's going on down there. And my real interest in it is the plastic. Is there plastic sinking to this undiscovered and very precious part of our planet? And if so, what does that mean?
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Emily. And I think it's one of these issues, isn't it, that everyone is starting to become really aware of now, isn't it? Plastic pollution.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, in the last year in particular, we've seen so much awareness on this issue, which has been fantastic because it's the first step towards actually solving it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have come across really disturbing pictures, actually. You kind of get these pictures, don't you, all the time of things like, really horrific images, actually, of things like turtles with, plastic straws up their noses and things. It's really quite horrible to see the impacts that plastic is having on our wildlife.
It is. It's unbelievable. And certainly, for me, 11 years ago, when I was taking a boat around the world and started seeing this plastic in places that it really didn't belong, and starting to understand this material as something that lasts forever, and yet we design things to be used once and then thrown away, and then the impact that has on our environment, and as you say, on our wildlife, is something that up until recently has been so far out of sight and out of mind that we really haven't done anything about it. But now it's really time to act.
And is this something that kicked off your kind of, the clear need to get this across to the public? Is this something that really kicked off your interest in essentially sailing around the world and bringing it to people, saying, look, it's everywhere, this plastic is everywhere?
So for me, I actually was on my way to a new job as an architect in Australia,
right, okay.
But I wanted to get there without taking an aeroplane.
Yes, fantastic.
So that's how it began for me, and it was then that journey from England to Australia when I crossed the Pacific Ocean and started to see plastic floating around at sea and also washing up on these small islands that were completely uninhabited, remote atolls, that I thought, this really doesn't make sense. And that, for me, led into a journey of understanding the issue better that's now led to really sharing it and trying to solve the problem.
And could you tell us a bit more, Emily, about the Sky News Deep Ocean Live mission? You mentioned it at the beginning there a little bit. So what exactly is going to take place with this?
Yeah, so right now there are 2 submersibles that are submersing down to 300 metres in the Indian Ocean to get a look at a bit of our planet that's completely unexplored, uncharted, unmapped territory. And they will be doing scientific research along the way to better understand the impacts of both plastic pollution but also climate change and the other major threats that we know on the ocean at the moment. But the really kind of novel, unique thing that's going on at the same time is the fact that this is being broadcast live from deep ocean to people in their living rooms around the world. Because, I'm a big believer that to be able to solve this problem, we need to get eyes on the issue.
Yes.
And by taking everybody there with us is a really good way to start that process.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I urge all of our listeners to certainly check this out and get on board with it and check out what's going on. And Emily, just so people have, people perhaps haven't read up much about it before, and maybe they've seen pictures and things in the news and things like this, but how widespread is this issue of plastic at the moment?
So, having spent 10 years now literally sailing to every corner of the planet, we found it in almost every sample that we've collected, whether that's in the middle of these gyres, the accumulation zones where the plastic wants to move, or up in the Arctic, in the places that should be pristine. What we don't know, though, is the three-dimensional aspect, which is it also sinking to the bottom of the seabed, which we expect is most likely the case.
Yes.
Hence the research being done now to really find out.
And that will be extremely depressing, won't it, to see that it's actually down at the very deepest level. And you kind of think that that's kind of an alien world almost, don't we? It's totally separate, but of course it isn't. And if we find plastic down there, I think that's going to be horrendously depressing.
Exactly. It's so all interconnected, and there's creatures that live in the deep and then they come to the surface, and lots of other kind of current mechanisms which are moving things up and down. And I think we also don't really understand how important the depths of our ocean are to the whole chemistry of the ocean and our planet as a whole. And we're sort of damaging that before we fully understand it. So there's a lot of work to do on definitely the protection of the ocean, but it starts with every one of us. There's things that we can do in our own lives. There's a lot of the Sky Ocean Rescue messaging, if you head on over to their website, is all about how you can simply reduce single-use plastic in your daily life, because that really is the place that we should all be starting.
Yeah, fantastic, thanks. I'm just guessing here that they haven't called the submarine boating at Boatface.
They haven't, no.
Oh.
I don't know if at some point that was on the cards, but it didn't get the vote.
Yeah, it had its chance, right? Yeah, well, thanks very much, Emily. I wonder if, just to finish up with Emily, I'd love actually, and this is a bit silly, and you must excuse me, but I'd just like to give you a song request, actually. Have you got a song that I can play for you today? Just, as a small way of saying thank you for coming on the show with us, really. I don't know if I can interest you in that at all. Or is it too daft?
Oh gosh, haven't got any ideas really. What's something nautical? What have you got there?
I can think
something that's not the yellow submarine. But,
yeah.
Something topical.
I'll think of something. I'll think of something suitable, I reckon. Yeah. It won't be that though, because the listeners probably, when I said that, are thinking, "Oh no, please not that song, please."
Yeah. There is a yellow submarine involved and a red one, actually.
Oh no, that's dangerous news. Maybe we should. Maybe I might play it. I don't know. Maybe. Perfect. Well, thanks very much, Emily. Really appreciate your time today, and I'll let you go. But thanks again for chatting to us.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome back to the studio. It's me, Ben, here. Now, you know what? I'm going to move on with the show because it is time to welcome our scientist star of the week. It's Joan Strassman. Now, as we're going through this, as we're chatting, as I said before, she talks about symbiosis here. If you're not familiar with that term, don't worry. She's going to run through what that means and the organisms she works on, because they're fantastic, these amoebae. But as we're going through, if you want to check out a little bit more and perhaps do a bit of reading whilst you're listening even, then that's fantastic. Obviously, please don't do that if you're driving, for obvious reasons. Please be safe. But anyway, find her on Twitter. That's one of the best places to find her, actually. Very simply, it's just at Joan Strassman. And here it gives her a little description. She's an evolutionary biologist, studies social behaviour in insects and microbes, and she's interested in education, travel, birds, tropics, nature, food. And of course, she is a professor of biology. Going to get her straight on. She's got a storming song request. So, Joan, thank you very much again for coming on the show, and thank you for a marvellous song choice as well. Here she is, ladies and gents. Please offer her a very warm welcome to the show here on Coast. Before we kind of get on to some of these bigger questions associated with your work, I wonder if we could just start with the amoebae themselves, because they sound like a super cool study system to work with. I wonder if we could kind of talk a little bit about the organisms themselves, where are they found, for instance, all the basics, basically, for our listeners. They can kind of imagine these as we're talking about them.
So the thing that's interesting about amoebae is it's not really a taxonomic category generally. It's more of a life form. It's a eukaryote, which means it has a nucleus and mitochondria, and essentially is in the same largest group of life as we humans are. So get that out of the way. Amoeba is just a life form of a blobby-like thing that crawls through the environment, engulfing food and dividing by binary fission. The social amoebae that I study are a specific group. They're in a larger taxonomic unit called the Amoebozoa. And the actual genus that I work on is called Dictyostelium, and the species is Dictyostelium discoideum. These are amoebae that are called social because when they starve, they get together with other amoebae in the environment. They aggregate. They actually form a multicellular body that looks like a tiny little slug, crawls around, and ultimately forms a fruiting body. That's where things get interesting, because in the fruiting body, about a quarter of them die to make a stalk that the others swarm up, and from this tiny little 1 millimeter high tree, about the size of a rice grain, there the spores are sticky and they're more likely to be picked up and transported somewhere else where hopefully there may be more food.
Fantastic. I suppose the kind of obvious question that listeners might have at this point is, this sounds like a really, really kind of extreme form of sociality, in which, of course, actually some of them are committing this kind of altruistic suicide. And I suppose the obvious question for them might be, how does that occur? Of course, they might be familiar with natural selection and being essentially selfish. How would this occur?
So actually, in microbes of all kinds have lots of sociality, which involves the ultimate sacrifice, altruism, death. And in this particular case, the explanation comes from the observation that wild collected fruiting bodies tend to be comprised largely of clone mates, but not entirely. And I should go back to answer the question you asked earlier about where they occur. So Dictyostelium is everywhere in the soil. You'll find it in your back garden. You'll find it everywhere. The specific species that I work on is not actually found in Europe. It's eastern half of the U.S. and, puzzlingly, also eastern Asia.
Right.
So we have collected in all the eastern U.S. and then also in Japan.
And coming on to, because I suppose one of the questions which I kind of wanted to ask, but I suppose it's actually quite a complicated thing to answer in kind of a short time frame. It's the most obvious question, of course, and this is kind of coming on to what sociality really means. I mean, I know you've in a keynote talk actually available on your lab website, you've addressed this before, and there's obviously a number of different ways that you can look at this. But I suppose it might come as a bit of surprise actually to listeners that if you ask a really simple question, what sounds simple to a listener, it might, what is sociality? Quite difficult to answer that, isn't it? There's a bunch of different ways you can answer that depending on what you're interested in, I suppose.
So I think all of your listeners will have their own idea of what sociality is, and they will be familiar with going to the pub with their mates. They'll also be familiar with going home to their families and their children, and they'll have no trouble understanding the difference between going to the pub with their mates to whom they are not entirely related. There may be some relatives there, but they're not related. And then the much deeper ties they would have, say, to their own children. So I think we do understand the basic elements of sociality. Now, we biologists tend to be interested in how these different things evolve, and we expect to see advantages anytime organisms are social. That's not to say you're going to have more children if you have more friends down at the pub or anything so simplistic as that. But if you look at animals, or particularly at microbes, it could well be that those occurring in certain kinds of groups may get benefits, and that those benefits would be different among relatives as composed to among non-relatives.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, thank you for answering the questions so far. I won't keep you too much longer now, Joan, I promise, but I'd really like to touch on perhaps a couple of things, and we'll see if we've got time to do these. We don't have to cover all of these points I've got listed here, but I know one of the things that's interesting about these amoebae as well is that they're involved in this symbiosis with, is it bacterial symbionts that you're particularly interested in? I know you'll be talking about this in your seminar today. So what's going on here? Because I suppose this is, again, one of those things to a listener. It might sound a bit weird, actually, that there's these. I mean, symbiosis in general probably sounds a bit strange when you first start thinking about it for a listener. But what's going on here? So these amoebae have these bacterial symbionts that live inside them, essentially.
Right. So symbiosis simply means living together and with some physiological benefit. Relationship doesn't have to be a benefit. I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with mutualistic interactions. I think the many sheep that you see in the fields around here could be viewed as mutualistic interactions. We take care of them and we eat them, but not all of them. And so mutualisms are easy to understand. They can be different species, and each party gets something different. We first discovered that our social amoebae, some of them actually carried food bacteria with them inside their cells, and then were able to let them loose, proliferate, and then they ate them. And my son-in-law is Peruvian and works on alpaca husbandry in the high Andes, and we talked together a lot about how what our Dictyostelium were doing was just like what his high Andean herders were doing with their alpaca. So we were pretty smug and happy and published that. But one thing about being a scientist is you should never be too smug, because you will be shamed. And probably the best is when you can shame yourself. And in our case, it was another little bacterium inside these Dictyostelium that didn't serve as food, but turned out to be running the whole show and permitting the other food bacteria to come in. And that bacterium is in the genus Burkholderia. This is a genus that has both pathogenic for human members and plant beneficial members. And so this Burkholderia was just doing all kinds of complicated things that also let the amoebae carry food bacteria. So, yeah, it's complicated.
That sounds fantastic. I think just the fact that they're kind of farming these microbes, that's awesome. I think that will come as quite a shock to our listeners, actually, thinking that something that might seem so kind of small and insignificant, they won't see them with the naked eye or anything, doing things like this. That's fantastic. I wonder if one of the final things I'd really like to touch on, just because I think, again, it's one of those things that I think just sounds weird, and it sounds super cool as well. I guess this is another one of the reasons why you're keen on these amoebae and they're so useful, is because I know some of your work actually looking at the term greenbeard genes, and essentially you've looked at the kind of single gene greenbeard genes, which of course I suppose typically thought of to be probably not possible, because the kind of process is thought to be quite complicated. I wonder if you could kind of outline that, because I know that's a term that may have come to the attention of our listeners if they've been reading Dawkins or things like this. So what exactly does that mean, and how are you looking at that?
So Richard Dawkins has just written the best book for really explaining how natural selection works on the level of the genes. It's quite old. It's called The Selfish Gene. It's from 1976. And he brings up the idea that if you can't figure out who your relatives are, maybe there would be a physical cue that would tell you. And this is a really interesting idea. Of course, you know who your relatives are, not through any physical cue, but because they're right there in your family, and you have had social experiences that tell you these are your children, or this is your aunt or your uncle. So the problem so greenbeard is simply a physical marker that would tell you. And the problem for theorists with that sort of a marker is that since you give aid to your family in ways you don't give to others, anybody that evolved the signal that you were a relative would receive the benefit, and then they could lose the gene that made them provide the cost, which would be sharing of aid. So it was considered to be an impossible thing to have. I think our thinking generally has changed on that quite a bit recently, and some people think that all of something called frequency-dependent selection has its foundations in the same theory, and I won't go into that, but I'll tell you about our social amoebae do have specific genes that they use for recognition, and exactly how that avoids the problem of a cheater who takes advantage of the recognition but then doesn't provide the benefit is it's still an area of active research, but I think we've figured out some of the reasons why that can occur.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. I think just towards the end of the interview now, so you can escape, but I'd like to finish on a couple of things really. First of all, just places that we can kind of point our listeners to get a bit more information about your work and things. I know you run a blog as well, which listeners might be interested in checking out, but is there anywhere that you might urge our listeners to go and have a look?
Yes, I do have a website. If you Google my last name, you will be able to find stuff. I'm sure you can provide that. My blog actually has a different goal from research. The point of my blog is to open up the scientific field to people who did not grow up in privileged families where people were scientists and knew how to do things. So the point of my blog is to spill the beans on all the unwritten rules of academia that might be useful to a much broader audience to make the field more diverse.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed. And you know what, I'd love to finish with this now. And this is a silly question, I'm afraid, but I'd really like, if it's of any interest to you at all, to give you a song request to accompany your appearance on the show. Now, I know this is harsh because I've got the recorder on and this is super last minute, but have you got an obvious song that springs to your mind that I can play for you? Because this can sort of be like your theme tune, if you like, if you've got a favourite song. If you'd like some time to think about that, that's absolutely fine.
I'll just throw out a really trite answer that might seem trite, but it actually defines a lot of my work, and that is a lot of what I work on has to do with boundaries and with selfish and cooperative different interests. So the song that really fits with that is Imagine.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. We'll play that then. Well, thank you very much indeed, Joan. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Sure, thank you.
That was Joan Strassman. Thank you very much again, Joan, for coming on the show. Professor of Biology at Washington University in St. Louis, of course, talking about her work in social amoebae. Now, she mentioned a couple of websites there. I will put those on the Facebook page for the show. If you just Facebook me at Ben's radio show, you'll find me there, and I will get those links to you, and you can check it out. Check out all her work. She's on Twitter as well, which is a good place to start if you're interested. Very simply, that's just at Joan Strassman. We can find some links. Actually, the link to her blog is on there as well. But as I said, those links will be available on my Facebook page. Now, there's just one final guest for you this evening before I love you and leave you, but don't go anywhere because coming up next, it's Noah's Archive radio show. Noah is in the building. He's going to treat you, really. He's going to really treat you to some of his music from his personal collection, so look forward to that. That's coming up next, so don't go anywhere. But the last interview on this show is going to be Ewan Thomas, MBE. Now, I actually caught Ewan ahead of the London Marathon. Ewan is a Welsh sprinter. He represented Great Britain and Northern Ireland at the Olympic Games in the 400-metre sprint. Ewan's got some tips, really, for any budding runners out there. So this is particularly good, I think, if anybody is thinking about attempting a marathon next year, or even just setting some running challenges. Perhaps you're looking to get into fitness, looking to get into running, then this is a good place to start. So Ewan is going to close up the show for us this evening. Before that, though... Hi, Ewan, how are you doing? Thanks very much for this.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks very much for chatting to us on Coast and Source today. Really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure, no problem.
I'm also going to warn you, actually, Ewan. I'm going to have to give you a little song request for this interview. A small way of saying thank you. Is that all right? I'll get a song request out of you at the end.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to think what I'll request.
Nice. I've given you a bit of chance, I think.
I like a lot of songs, but I quite like Keen Bed Shape. That's too long, though, isn't it, for radio?
No, anything that you want, it's only fair.
No, I'll tell you what I'm going to ask. No, I know what I'm going to ask you for. I'll tell you when we do it.
Okay, sweet, excellent. Yeah. A strong choice coming up then. That's excellent to hear. Well, you know what, it's fantastic to have you ahead of the London Marathon, of course. And, the obvious thing really to do with a runner such as yourself is just get some advice for our listeners, really, for anyone who is planning to either, run the marathon itself, or I suppose as well, I was thinking just running in general would be great to get some advice from yourself today.
Sure. I mean, I think the London Marathon is like nothing else on this planet. I mean, it's pretty tricky. I've done 8 of them, but it's a credit to the Virgin Money London Marathon. It's such a good event. I always want to come back and do it again and again. So it's a very different running style and obviously distance to what I was used to in my professional life being a sprinter.
Yes.
So it is tough.
And in terms of the kind of charity work that's obviously always going on, which is a fantastic accompaniment to the marathon, what kind of charities we're looking at this year?
Well, there's lots of different charities. Everybody will probably be running for their own personal charities. So I think that the chosen charity this year from Virgin Money is Alzheimer's and dementia. That's a great charity. I know a lot of people are running for that. I personally run for Macmillan. Everybody will have their own different reasons for running, and that's the beauty of the Virgin Money London Marathon. You look around you, and there's so many bright vests. There's so many different people running for different reasons. They'll have people who they may have lost. They'll be running for perhaps with a picture of their late mother on their vest or whatever it might be. And it's quite an emotional day, really. And when it does hurt, because obviously 26.2 miles is a long way, I think a lot of people just look at their vests, look at their charities, and they remember why they are running for such worthy causes, and that's what gets people to the finish line.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, couldn't think about anything better really for any runners out there to get involved. And I guess as well, it might be really nice for those people to hear how you personally like to train and prepare for it.
Well, it's quite different to what I was used to as an athlete, because obviously I was a sprinter, so I was all about fast twitch fibres, explosive training, getting from A to B as quickly as possible. And marathon running and marathon training is the polar opposite, really, because it's all about conservation of energy and running as efficiently as you can. So I think the training for the marathon, it's varied. Obviously, you have to put in a long run every weekend, and the distance gets further and further. But this close to the race, the marathon runners won't be doing any training now. They'll just be resting, stretching, eating lots and drinking lots. So it's all about really executing their race plan as well as they can come Sunday, and really not getting too carried away with the occasion and going off too fast. Yes,
fantastic. And Ewan, I wonder if we could kind of talk about, I suppose, running in general just for a second as well, because I think one thing that that some people might be thinking about is when they see the marathon taking place is, oh, this looks fantastic, I want to get involved. How would you suggest that people like that get started with running? Perhaps if they're a complete beginner, where's the best place to start, do you think?
Well, I think set realistic goals. Don't all of a sudden think I'm going to get myself a pair of trainers and go for a 15-mile run, because it won't happen. So you might want to just say to yourself, to start with, I'm going to start jogging around the block, or I'm going to, go for an hour-long walk, or I'm going to do a 5K at the weekend. I might one day do a half marathon. But I think it's very important to set yourself a target. So, for example, every year I will do some form of race, which is quite tough for me to do because it gives me a reason to keep fit. So I think it would be very unwise for someone to go from doing nothing whatsoever to doing a marathon, but meet in the middle somewhere, do a 10K or a half marathon, and then if you like it and you're getting fitter and fitter, I've got to say the Virgin Money London Marathon would be the best marathon you can choose. I've done it 8 times, and every time I've done it, I just think, wow, I've been part of something truly special today. So I think the big goal, the aim at the end of everyone's journey should be something like a marathon. And in fact, Virgin Money did some research, and a third of people questioned did say on their bucket list would be to complete a marathon at some point in their life. So clearly people enjoy running, and clearly people see the marathon as the ultimate distance, if you want, to try and achieve.
Yeah, fantastic. It's kind of like as you say, like an ultimate goal for people to work towards. So I think if we do have any, total beginners listening, then as you say, I really urge them to start getting involved with running. Obviously, don't go straight for it, and see that as an end goal, as you say.
Definitely, and I think you've got to realise we're all different shapes and sizes, and a lot of people I know, people contact me on social media and say, I've let myself get out of shape, I'm too embarrassed to go to the gym, people are going to judge me. Nobody judges you. The only people who do any judging are idiots, really. So I think good luck to everybody who takes up running, whatever starting point you're at. It can only get easier. You're only going to get fitter. So just get out there and do it. And one thing I would say personally, I find about going for a run, it's really good for your mindset as well. You might have had the most stressful day at work, or you might be having some troubles at home in your personal life. You put your shoes on, you put some music on, you turn your phone off, you go out for a nice little run, and I guarantee you'll come back feeling better about the world. So I think running also isn't just good for people's physical fitness. I think it's good for their mental well-being as well.
Fantastic, thanks, Ewan. Perhaps everyone listening, even if they've never thought of it before, could think perhaps about trying it out at least and getting involved.
Yeah, definitely. I think don't be fazed by it. Don't think you've got to be like Mo Farah or Usain Bolt if you want to put a pair of shoes on. Not at all. As I said, we're all different fitness levels, all different shapes and sizes. Running is something that's wonderful to do. You don't have to join a gym. You can just put your shoes on, shut your front door, and go for a steady jog.
Fantastic. Now, you touched on this already, actually, Ewan. I think you made a really nice point here, but I guess one of the questions I was keen to ask you is, presumably there is this point that people get to when they're running something massive like a marathon. You kind of get hit this, imaginary wall that you can't push through, and you think, oh, God, I can't do this, I'm going to have to stop. And I was going to ask you how people push through that. And I think you kind of alluded to one of the main things that people do, and they just remember the reason that they're running in the first place.
Yeah, I think just remember the reason why you're running. Remember the fantastic charities that people are supporting. And also just change your mindset a little bit. So you might get to a stage and you might think, right, I'm clearly not going to run all the way to the finish line. But you know what I will do? I'm going to jog to that lamppost. I'm going to walk for 5 minutes. I'm going to try and run again. So just sort of change your mindset. And if you've never had to go to I call it the dark place, but if you've never had to go to a dark place before, it might be new to you. But yes, it's all about mental strength, really. Yes, at some point, Virgin Money London Marathon this weekend, people will hit the wall. Some people won't hit it till mile 20. Some might hit it as early as mile 12. But when you do begin to feel your body shutting down and feeling in a certain amount of pain, just dig deep, really. And as I said, when you get that medal at the finish line, you'll realise it was worth going through that pain, because you're going to feel so proud of yourself once you've achieved it.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. I imagine as well this was kind of something which presumably you had to face an awful lot in your professional career. In your training, I can't imagine that being anything remotely easy, and you probably had to face this an awful lot. That feeling where you think, I can't keep going, but you've got to get through it, right? And look where you are. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, I was one of those weird individuals. I don't mind admitting it, that I quite like the pain of training.
Yeah,
being a 400 metre runner, all it was about lactic acid build up and putting yourself through that pain barrier. But I strangely miss. Maybe that's why I still do marathons. I strangely miss that kind of pushing myself as hard as I can. So it's a little bit of an addiction, if I'm honest with you. Once you get a taste for sprinting or long distance running, or just pushing yourself as much as you can, then I think that's why people come back for more and more.
Well, it does make you feel incredible, doesn't it? When you've done some exercise, I've been a complete amateur myself, but even when I've done some exercise, I just feel absolutely great after it. And I think that feeling is really addictive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been proven that the body releases endorphins and you just feel happier. And I know myself, if I've had a rubbish day or I'm feeling a little bit low, I go for a run, and 9 times out of 10 I come home and I'm feeling absolutely brilliant about myself. So, I think it sounds a bit of a weird one, but the amount of times I can't be bothered to go training and it's a dark winter's night, I think, I can't be bothered to go out for a run. And I force myself to do it, and I come back and I'm like, I'm so pleased I did that. It really does change your mindset and make you feel good.
Of course, I haven't forgotten about your song request, Ewan.
I think a song I would love to hear is one I used to warm up to as an athlete, and very sadly he's no longer with us, but it would be the Firestarter by The Prodigy.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, what a fantastic choice there. Thank you very much indeed, Ewan.
Cheers.